Welcome to episode 17 of the DWRD Net Stationary Feed. Today's guest is Logan Merrill from Little Hollow Customs. Welcome, Logan. Please introduce yourself and just give a brief overview about about Logan and Little Hollow Customs.
So, as you already introduced, I'm Logan. Um, Little Hollow Customs is kind of, I don't want to say that I'm a pen maker because I do a lot of other random stuff, and that's kind of the reason we left it as Little Hollow Customs was to leave the door open for future changes. Um, but I, I guess probably the quickest, easiest way to explain would be to say that I'm an outside of the box thinker that enjoys functional art. Uh, so Little Hollow Customs has been my outlet for that, and it gives me the opportunity to kind of get my hands on something at the end of the day and make pens, which
Oh, that's great.
a couple
Yeah,
years ago I wouldn't have believed was a thing.
yeah. If you're a maker or you're a creator, you have to have that outlet, and that's a common theme I've seen so far. Is it's people have their day job, but then when they come home, they don't want to be at a desk. They want to be hands-on doing something. So that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
To start us off, we have our kind of level-setting question. So up first will be, what do you currently have inked? What have you been writing with lately?
Um, you'll notice a bit of a trend here. I have maker pens. So currently I have a TriStar Studio inked up. I've got one of Jonathan Brooks' Charleston models. I've got one of my own because I had to make sure that they write well, obviously. And somewhere here, I've got a Mythic Pen Company, Aeschylus, I believe. So a lot of maker pens.
No, and that makes perfect sense. What kind of nibs? Are you a extra fine, a broad, a medium? Do you have a variety of nib sizes, or do you just kind of stick to one?
Learning. Um,
Learning.
right now, I think I've got a medium, a fine. I've got one with a kind of custom monoline grind from Kirk Spear. I had him go a little bit smaller than normal for me. And then I've also got one of his needlepoint nibs that I just inked up after the St. Louis show. And I think that's currently my favorite at the moment because I write really small.
See, I'm almost everything I have is extra fine. In fact, I just got this today. It's a posting nib, so it's essentially production needlepoint from Pilot that I'm
Okay.
make a video will come out soon on, but I write in tiny print. So the finer the nib, the better. So the needle points, the extra fines, the ultra extras, that's my go-to. So I can fully appreciate when you're a small writer. If I use a broad nib, it's like writing with a paintbrush, and it just you can't read it
They're
after that. So
they're so fun to write with. I love the monoline grind, but I realize that I pause to think a lot while I'm writing, and if I pause while that pen's on the paper, it's gonna leave it doesn't work well.
yeah,
Whereas the needlepoint, I can pause to think, and it doesn't mess me up too bad. So
no,
that's
that makes
currently
perfect
my
sense.
go-to.
So what kind of inks do you have in your pens? Do you stick to kind of the known favorites, or do you like to explore with a variety of different inks and brands and colors?
So I actually tend to I have a if I find something that I like, I stick with it. I haven't actually had much chance to experiment with a bunch of inks. I think 3 out of the 4 I've got inked right now are Andorralium. So I've got the blue ringed octopus, the orange octopus one, um, and then my daily is a private reserve black ink.
Okay, makes sense. What about paper? What kind of paper do you like writing on? Aside, and I'll put a caveat: aside from terrible day job paper, which might be common, if when you're writing when it's not on copy paper, what kind of paper do you like to write on?
I actually forgot what it is. Um, Odyssey. I've got an Odyssey notebooks.
Okay.
I love the dot grid. I haven't experimented much with the different types of paper, but the dot grid layout is by far my favorite out of the options I've tried.
No, I'm a dot grid or the 2 millimeter actual grid that's so light. It
Okay.
as a small writer, you might try that as well because
Yep.
I really love the 2 millimeter grid, like the Clyde or the plotter paper, and there's a couple others. But other than that, I'm a dot grid person as well. So that makes perfect sense as a small writer. That seems to be a common theme as well.
It also comes in
So
really handy in the shop.
yeah, I could see that. I could see that when I was talking to Sean Newton a while back, episode wise. He actually, when I first met Sean, he bought one of the notebooks I was making for when I vended the 1 year of Arkansas, and he still had it up on his shelf. So that's kind of neat to have. It was just kind of a
Yep,
little A6 size, write down scratch notebook, which it's cool to see it around 10 years later.
I bet.
So, I know you have a lot of maker pens, but if there was no budget and someone would hand you any pen that existed, what do you think it would be?
This is the one that stumped me, and I was trying to come up. I've been looking at everybody's talking about their Grail pens has been for a while, and I'm new enough to the pen side of things that I actually don't know what it would be yet. Um, I've found so far, I know a couple of the next ones I'm going to be looking for are the more technically complicated ones. So like Shown Design has some really really nice work that I fully intend to get my hands on. Um, what are some other ones that have been popping up? I think Shown's the one that's definitely coming to mind. As far as Grail, I don't know. Uh, I haven't been able to find one yet.
Well, as a maker, I could see after having talked to Nick Pasquale with him being local and going to his shop and seeing all his materials, the drawer of the like crazy rare high end material. So maybe that's going to be your grail is the crazy material with a maker pen. So then you kind of get the grail material, which adds into the maker pen enjoyment.
Right.
Maybe that's something you look for, but I agree with Shown Design. A Monarch is on my list. I just haven't pulled the trigger yet because I'm like,
Yep.
since I write small, I would have to get it ground finer than normal, and I need to. I believe he's coming out with a blade grind that I want to try that once it happens and it's more widespread to see versus buying one and then immediately getting it ground smaller. Just to make sure I'm being smart with the purchase, even though I know at some point I'm going to
Right.
get one regardless. But so, and then my favorite question that I love to ask: what's your favorite stationary adjacent accessory? Be it a case, a bag, something that's always on your desk that you use all the time that is not pen, paper, or ink.
Currently, my notebook cover. Um, I've got. I don't know how well this is going to show. Um, but I had Roger with Bellow Leathers make
Okay,
up a custom A5 notebook cover with business card slots, um,
nice,
and a removable pen sleeve. Um,
very cool.
so I can swap out the size of the pen sleeve for different size pens. And this thing it's not worn in because I'm afraid to wear it in. Uh, so I'm being very careful with it. Uh, but that makes me very happy for no apparent reason.
No, good leather, anything, it makes perfect sense. And having for me, I recently got into the plotter side and seeing the patina like starting to develop on here just from holding and whatnot.
Yep,
I love that. So it's because my wife is the same way. She has a really nice notebook and she hates to let it leave the house. And she used to be like that with some of her pens. Now she's kind of gotten where pens can leave the house, they can be used. It doesn't matter if they're a nice pen; they're meant to be written with. So
yep,
I fully get the you get to a certain point though where you're going to be like, you know what, this notebook's going wherever. That seal once that seal breaks, then it's a lot easier for all the follow up. So
yep. My problem is it goes with me, but then every time I go to write something down, it's just a quick note, and I don't want it taking up space in my notebook. And I end up using a bunch of random pieces of scrap paper, and the notebook itself remains almost untouched.
So perforated pages. Find you a
Yes,
notebook that has perforated pages like Nimacine or something like that. And then you can just rip the page out and your notebook is still pristine and you still have whatever notes you need. I do that for work notes. I write in Nimacine and then I pull them out. Some of them end up in the plotter, some of them end up in the trash, but
yep,
that way I have options.
that sounds like a good solution.
So let's move on to the main topic of just Little Hollow Custom. So to start out, when did you first get into pens and stationery as a whole?
2022. It was honestly kind of accidental, uh, but my first introduction to the stationary side was with a pen I turned because I needed a challenge, and um, we had just moved here, and I didn't have the ability to set up my old wood shop, so I went out and I bought a little used wood lathe, uh, and the gentleman that sold it to me threw in a couple of odds and end kits that he had laying around, and one of them was a pen kit. So I put this little, I think it was a European twist from Penn State, just a little cross refill kit pen. Uh, but I put that on the lathe and turned it, and it was fun, and actually came out to something that I was excited about, and I started turning a few more, and then from there you find out all the different possibilities and start realizing, oh, you can actually have a nice pen and it doesn't have to be a Bic or a Sharpie, and it's a slippery slope.
No, definitely. So did you just work through the kind of kits that came with the lathe, and then find I need to go order some more kits? When did you actually make the kit fountain pen transition?
I think I looked this up this morning. My first fountain pen was in May of 2023, so a little over a year after I started with the kits. Um, because I think I had like 5 kits that came with the lathe, and then I found out there's a woodworking shop 7 minutes from my house that sells pen kits and blanks, and I think I made probably a couple hundred pens in that year. Um, Great time, but I found out that there's limitations on the size, and you have to when you're working with a kit, trying to pick a material that pairs well with the kit is a challenge. So sometimes you'd find the material that's absolutely stunning, but you couldn't find anything that goes with it. Uh, so I was looking a little bit for kind of other possibilities that didn't require the manufactured kits, and I stumbled across Jason Neal Penworks' Craft of Analog videos, and started watching those, researching on the International Association of Pen Turners forum, and kind of pieced together, okay, this is the list of tools I need, and I made a fountain pen as kind of a just next step up, something I can learn to do that doesn't require the manufactured hardware. Um, and then the first one, I should have grabbed that one. It's down in the basement. The first one was I called it the baton. It was a straight stick with a nib in on the inside when you unscrewed it. It was terrible, uh, but learning curve. Uh, so that was the first one, and then I just started experimenting. Used all the spare blanks I had in the house, and just put together probably 5 to 10 different fountain pens, trying to figure out how it actually works, what I can do. And then I think the first one that actually was to the point that I allowed it to leave the house uh, was a fountain pen that I made for the 2023 uh, as the Pen Turns Secret Santa event they do every year.
Okay.
Basically, a bunch of makers make pens and swap them with another maker. Um, so that was kind of my trial run to see if they were actually worth selling, and got good feedback there. And I don't I don't think I've made a kit pen without it being specifically requested since.
That seems like a common theme. It's you start with the kit, and then you kind of work through, and then you realize, wait, there's a whole different world of pins, and then you kind of do the trial at home, and then eventually you get to that point where, like, you know what, I think it's ready for this one to
Yep.
go out into the world and see. Now, do you have any other makers who are local to you that you were able to, like, once you realize that there's a whole community, were you able to hook up with any other local makers, or was it all just kind of trial and error and watching videos and online interaction?
All trial and error. I'm spoiled in that having probably I think the first real interactions I had with other makers was about at the Atlanta Pen Show in 2023. No, that
Okay.
was 2024. So last year's Atlanta Pen Show, got to meet some awesome people there. They've been spectacularly helpful with tips, tricks, techniques since then. And there's like 10 or 11 other fountain pen makers in North Carolina. I haven't hooked up with any of them yet. Some of them are within an hour of me. I don't know how we've missed it at this point. So far, I think the only one I've actually met with in person for shop time was Jonathan. And at this point, I've been down to his house twice, and he's been up here once. He's an awesome connection to have.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with the pen makers, he's talking about Jonathan Brooks, who's one of the more well-known material and pen makers because he's been doing it a very long time. So we'll put a link to Jonathan's website in the notes. But so you made your transition into pens. When did you get into? Because you have what, 2 models now currently in general, or when did you decide?
Two
I
pushing
want to
into the
make
third.
pens, but I want to make a couple of different models.
So it started with the baton. I was watching again Jason Neal's videos, and I really liked as an engineer, I really appreciate repeatability. So I figured out really quickly that I wanted to make one that was something that if you pick it up at a show and you love the way the pen fits in your hand and feels, if you decide down the road that you want one in a different color, or pattern or whatever it might be. Uh, I wanted to make it to the point that somebody could order off the website, and if they'd picked up the pen once, they'd know what all of the other pens were going to feel like when they picked them up. So that was kind of the idea behind going for a model approach, was just repeatability. Because I mean, shows are a one-time deal. You show up, you get the opportunity to see it, but if I don't have the right color or pattern or combination, it might not be the one for you. So going with that, we started off with the Mistress model, and I promise there's a better story behind the name than it sounds like. uh, that was kind of the naming of that one was a tribute to a mentor of mine that had passed away not too long before I got the chance to start this. Mistress was the name of his work truck. He was actually my first employer, and the running joke was he loved his job so much that he spent more time with his truck than with his wife. So that was kind of my reminder to myself to love the job, make the most of it, use your skill set to be a benefit and a joy to the people around you. So that was the Mistress model, and then I, with my background, I love working with metal. I've taken welding courses, I've done blacksmithing, wanted to tie that a little bit into the pens. So, genius idea. I decided I was going to make a brass one. For the record, the brass Mistress model is heavy. Because that was my first attempt, is I took the Mistress model and I made it in brass. And about the second paragraph, my hand started cramping. I'm like, this is not. Some people love it. It's not for me. Um, so I basically went back to the drawing board using all the same internal components. So Yovo number 6 nib and a Schmidt K5 converter. And I drew up the diagrams of minimum dimensions on the inside to be able to get everything in there. And then I drew the thinnest line around it that I could with all of the body to section threads and the section to cap threads. And that's the shape of the reduction model, is basically take the internal components and make it as small as possible. So that's for reference here. If I actually have a Mistress on the desk, I might have set it to the side. So I don't know how well you can see that, but that's the Mistress model.
Okay.
In brass, it's heavy. It's just too heavy. That comes out in resin, it's only like 20 grams. So in comparison, the reduction model is just smaller overall. And to achieve that, I basically made it so that the cap threads onto the end of the section instead of covering the whole body, because, covering the whole grip, because if it covered the grip, it added more weight. Found out after the fact that it's a very, very similar to design to Mayfair's Noldor, I think it is, which made me revise a few things, and I won't be doing that one in resin for that reason. But that's the birth of the reduction design. And then the new one, which I'm not sure if you've seen any of the piston fillers that we've been working on.
I saw when looking at Instagram, kind of researching before the recording, your table from the recent show, but I
Yep.
didn't see a model name. So
I
I
don't
picked up the
have a
two from
model
the
name yet.
website. So,
Yep. I'm still working on a name. I haven't come up with one yet, but we've been experimenting with. Jim Hines told me in Atlanta last year that we needed to look at piston fillers, so I snagged some piston fillers from him and started experimenting. And this is the current piston filler design. This one's actually a commission in progress. Still needs to be polished, but mostly complete. And what we're doing to make that one unique is it's actually hybrid as well. So that has a brass grip resin body so you can see the ink, and a brass rear finial to balance it out.
very neat. And that actually leads into my next question. I'm noticing the hybrid models, which I haven't seen from many makers, and it makes sense if you have made the full metal, and that's just too heavy for for longer writing sessions. Kind of combining and doing the metal section and then the synthetic body be whatever blank you're using. It's kind of the best of both, where you get that, because I personally love metal section pins. Like, this is one of my Gravitas, the titanium, where it's got the metal section on it and it's got a little bit of grip. And it's not for everybody, but that's a good thing with these pins, especially maker pins, is, as I've said on some of these before, you might hand a pin to one person, they're like, no, that's not for me at all. And the next person's like, just take my money, I want that pin now. Because that's going to be the look or the feel, or it fits their hand, where they're like, nope, that's the one, and it has to come home with me right now.
So the metal hybrid was kind of, it was actually an accidental experiment. When I made the first reduction model, well, actually, when I made the brass mistress before the reduction, I was using the same threads as the mistress. So on the first one, I actually turned the section before I turned the body, and I needed to verify that the threads were working correctly, and I threaded it into a resin mistress model. And then what I wasn't really expecting and hadn't thought through was it actually changes the balance of the pen quite a bit, because brass is significantly more heavy than resin. So when you pick it up, resin pens are light enough they almost don't feel like they're there. With the brass grip, it actually tilts the pen forward into your fingertips. Not that fountain pens require a lot of pressure to write anyway, but it puts a little bit of downwards pressure on the paper without you actually pushing. It had a more substantial feel to it. And I got in the habit at the first show of taking the grip out of one of the reduction pens that we had and threading it into a brass mistress, to just as part of the conversation, to show people the difference in weight when you swap the section out, and people loved it. So from there, I had to actually make a brass grip option for the mistress. And then the other thing that came up is, you've probably seen some of the stuff about the metals that I use from Mike's Metalworking.
I think I saw a reference to it, but talk through that, because I was about to ask, what other metals besides brass have you moved into using?
So brass was the first experiment, and then I found out about, because I was really into knife making for a little bit and thought I was going to go that direction. But I've got 2 daughters, and with them around, I don't want a multiple 1,000-degree forge running, and I don't want a belt sander and sharp objects running. So knife making is down the road. But because of that, I actually found out about Mike through the knife making people that I follow, because he developed his materials for guards, bolsters, etc. So as a quick comparison, this is a brass. This is the newer version, so the others here are a little bit older. I don't know how well you can see the pattern on that other one.
Yeah, what we might do is we'll put a link to your Instagram post if you have some of those posted. We can put that in the notes just to show
Absolutely.
if the video is not showing. And just a side note, if you're listening to this on audio, go back and check the video version on YouTube, because Logan is holding up some examples that you'd want to see the variety of the pin models and the different materials.
So here's a good example. Um, so you've got one brass. The one in the center is Mike's gem bronze, which is it's a custom alloy that he created specifically to get that textured pattern on the surface. And then the one on the end is glacial brass, uh, basically a gem bronze alloy. And he'll correct me if I say this wrong. Um, it's similar to a gem bronze, so you get the same pattern on the surface, but he added nickel silver to bring it. Sorry, just nickel to bring it back towards the silvery side. Um, basically, he's really good at coming up with custom alloys. Gem bronze is actually in the process of being patented, and so far, I get to say I'm the only one that has ever made a pen from his materials.
That's pretty cool.
I'm excited about it because
Yeah,
it's a weird little detail, but to know that every gem bronze pen that currently exists is one that I made is just awesome. So I get to play with stuff like that. I've got Shibuichi in the basement that's currently in process for a commission, and that's 75% copper, 25% silver. The material that the guards on Japanese katanas used to be made out of. So I get to play with all kinds of stuff through him.
Now, one thing I noticed before, and you mentioned when Jonathan Brooks came to your shop, it wasn't that long ago you added a CNC. Now, is the how did the CNC change your ability with your metal pins? Are you still having to do those with metal lathe, or are you able to do CNC some and then manual turning some? How has that changed your making process?
The CNC was a huge upgrade. I was very nervous about taking the leap into the CNC. It's not a cheap shift, but especially with what I was finding, I was doing all of the metal pens on an a 1938 lathe. So it was very manual, and it was getting to the point if I was turning metal, I had to keep the kids out of the shop, because anytime you're turning metal, you're going to send metal shavings around. There was flakes and shrapnel essentially on the floor. I couldn't have them in the shop with me, and they love to be in the shop. So that was a big part of the reason we shifted to the CNC was just when it's running, it's fully enclosed, and if anything happens to open the door, it shuts off. So it eliminates the hazard for the kids to be in the shop, and it is fully capable of turning metal and resin. So the resin pens I've got fully programmed. Those are running completely on the CNC with minor updates every time I decide something needs to improve. The metal pens are actually almost completely made on the CNC now.
Okay.
Took some research and experimentation on the tooling side, because if you use the same tools as you use for the resin, it tears them to bits. But actually, the brass reduction pen I was just showing you a minute ago was the first one off the CNC.
No, very neat. And I like that because knowing that eventually I plan to get in to dip my toe into making pins, it gives you something to look forward to in the future. If it really takes off and you like it, technology can be your best friend or your worst enemy. And putting it
Exactly.
where it can make life better, it's going to have a learning curve and it's going to be very different, but sometimes you have to take that leap in order to advance your hobby or your business or your things like that. So because that would be a big leap. But then there's some people now they're running multiple CNCs because they've scaled up to a level, and
Yep.
It's crazy how that kind of technology can change. But that also leads me into a different form of technology that I've noticed of 3D printing. And on your website, I saw that you have some 3D printing pin stands and you're selling the STL files so people can make their own and licensing that. So talk about how you got into the 3D printing side and how that's evolved into your pin making as a whole.
3D printing is actually, for me, far predates the fountain pen side of things.
Okay.
I actually got into 3D printing 13 years ago.
Wow, you were an
Yep.
early adopter of that one.
Had, yeah, the kit I had at the time was like, it was probably $400 or $500. As I was getting started in college, because we were getting into 3D design. Uh, I had done some 3D design through high school and such, and that was my first introduction to it. Uh, got one of the kits, built my own, back when that was almost necessary, and now you can get significantly better 3D printers for the same price. Um, but I've been doing 3D printing for a long time, and the 3D design is probably the bigger part of that. Uh, Actually, never had any intention of making it part of the business. It was just something that I use to uh, make utility items for myself. So the functional side, I've used it for printing jigs for holding things in the correct position in the shop, printing guides and templates and such. Uh, and I actually used it to print the stands that I used for the Atlanta Pen Show, basically the first show that we did, and found out really quick that if you print stands that are standing up all the time, they take up a ton of space when you go to pack. Um, so we had an entire tote that we carried into the first pen show, that was just pen stands, and not really a fan of the process. And I was talking to a couple other people there, and they pointed out that the ones they had were acrylic and they were falling apart. Like they were intended to be taken apart and put back together, but they didn't really stay together when they were put together. So being the weird engineer, um, I took a minute and created this, um, which is basically a folding pen stand, so that I could take it to the show flat and then fold it out to display the pens. Uh, just created it so I'd have a way to display my pens without packing an entire extra tote, because now they fit in my pen case. Uh, but
No, and that I could
somebody
see
else
that
saw
being
them.
handy if you're having to fly.
Yes,
People who are flying cross country for a show, you don't want to you don't want to pay the baggage fees or shipping stuff. So if you
no,
can put some flat, 3D printed plastics and then still have stands when you get there, that's a win-win scenario in that case.
exactly. And hadn't really thought about it like that. I was just looking at it from a packing standpoint, and I set them up in Miami last year, and I had a couple other pen makers come up and be like, what's the deal with the stands?" And now there's probably 5 or 6 pen makers at least using them that I know of. Um, and there's a couple people were asking for the files. It takes a lot of time on my end because I have an older printer. Um, it takes time to print them off, so I just started selling people the file, um, and it was something that was a lot easier to just put on the website so people could have it when they wanted it. Um, and now a couple people have the license to actually print them and sell them, so I don't have to worry about printing them, and I still get to see people using the stands randomly, and it's always kind of a fun surprise. And then recently, Jonathan is in the process of making a transition over to using metal molds for his resin blanks. Sounds like a completely random sidetrack, but we were talking about it while he was here, and I had 3D printed myself a little rack to hold my molds while I'm pouring, because metal tubes don't stand up by themselves. Um, so he had listed off a couple of things that he was looking for when he's going to get a new stand. A stand for tubing in a pressure pot it's like $80 for a rack. Um, so I've got on my computer and modeled a new one and sent him the file, and it costs like $5 to print. It takes a couple hours, but it's about $5 in material. Um, and he showed it to Luke with Papa J Woodworks, Papa J Studio, no. Um, and Luke got all excited about it, and so Luke has the file now, and he's printing them like crazy. Getting to see those popping up all over the place. It's, say, never was really intended as part of the business. It's just at this point, it's something that I add on as it's a convenient addition for some of the makers because it's the utility stuff that I use.
No, and that actually, it's funny you mentioned that because that's on my list because there's so many different pen makers. It's hard to keep track of everybody. But when I was at Nick's shop on July 4th, Nick Pasquale, he had this cool stand there that he was, because there were a couple people in town. He was going to pour like a small batch of blanks, like a trial run.
Yep.
And he had this cool looking stand. He's like, oh yeah, this is a stand made by Little Hollow that Papa J printed. So I actually saw the stand before I put two and two together of who was who.
Yep.
And then I was texting him the other day. I was like, that was Little Hollow, right? He's like, yeah, but it was printed by Papa J. I was like, okay, getting all the people and thing. But that's what I love about the maker community is you all you're not really competitors with each other.
No.
You're counterparts because there's people who want one of everybody's pins, want multiple of everybody's pins, and making things like that makes it easier for all of you.
Exactly.
You making a file, you don't want to print it, so you can sell the license to someone else, and then they can print it. Because 3D printing, Sean Newton even talked about that, being able to make different collets when he's doing weird repairs, like a triangle OMOS.
Yep.
Printing a 3D or a triangle holder so he can put it around the precious material and not risk breaking it when he's doing a repair. That's a game changer. You're not spending tons of money on tooling when you can spend a few bucks in material to print it, and then you have the printer, which you're going to end up doing and making all sorts of other stuff. Because everybody I know with a 3D printer, they start with a little boat, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I printed these 12 things around my house. I'm making hooks. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So it's cool to be able to use your design skill, because that's probably the not the downfall, but just the education gap. Most people aren't designers. They're not going to be able to make the designs.
Right.
And if for pen making it's such a unique niche, they might not be able to find the right thing they need on Thingiverse or other sites that sell files. So with you being a maker, that lets you solve that creativity need in a different way a little bit, of making the files that then make your life easier, make the other maker's life easier. And then, like those stands, that just makes too much sense. You're going to see those everywhere because they fold down to nothing. They look nice. You can print different colors. That's cool to be able to combine that. And especially since that predated your pen making. I like to say some of my hobbies, like I used to be really into photography. Well, that's a hobby I'll never get rid of because I can use photography in all my other hobbies.
Yes.
When I get into doing YouTube and figuring out recording and whatnot, oh, yeah, I already know most of this because I used to do photography. I love when hobbies help other hobbies. And it sounds like that's a good example of you. Your 3D printing hobby has now enhanced your pen making hobby and your place in the pen maker community, because you're not holding the files to yourself. You're saying, oh, yes, you can purchase this so that way you can make and sell, because you don't have the desire to make and sell. You just want to make the ones you need. And then,
right.
Well, I need some more stands. You give it to one of the people who, hey, I'll give you the file. Can you print me 3 of these and send them over? You get that back and forth, which is great.
Yeah, because stands aren't super expensive, but when you start displaying 100 pens on your table, if the stand costs a fixed amount, it adds up quick. If you've got a 3D printer and it only costs the filament, the file's the cheap part. So it adds up. It was just more economically feasible, I felt, for other makers to have access to just print their own.
Then you're not paying shipping. You're not paying shipping for shipping plastic across the country. You're sending them an email with a file, and then they can print their own, and that just,
and they can get warm enough they warp in the shipping process, depending on the type of plastic.
Or if someone's traveling far enough, they can just find someone where they're going to get them to print some new stands and not
Yeah,
even bother traveling and just have like the borrow a stand, you know, bin. Oh, you're
I
going to
like
this
that
show?
idea.
Yeah, just have a bin, someone who's driving, mule stands for all the other makers, and just have the tote. I need the
We need
blue
to just have
stands, I
the
need the black stands, and
yeah.
like a lending library of pin stands of
Need to
sorts.
just have the organizers store a tote of stands available for anybody who needs them.
That because even for blank makers, being able to display blanks where they're not just laying on the table, so you can see the colors and variety, that might need a little bit of modification because I haven't seen the stand,
So
in
that's
person.
the beauty of
But
this stand. I, I,
yeah,
I went way too technical on the design. Uh, I can go into the design and type in the width of the slots, and it automatically adjusts. I can have it do more pens, less pens, change the display angle, all of it with just so any modifications to that stand take me less than 5 minutes. So
no,
now I'm
that
gonna have to print one off that'll display blanks. I hadn't thought about that.
well, having interviewed Lisa Marie from Poorly Controlled, and having been in Nick's shop, and you know seeing the volume of material that he has, I could see where if you're doing custom orders or you're taking custom orders at a show, because there might the finished pin might not be there, like you were saying.
Right.
It might not be the right thing. Oh, I want it in that material over there. You can display blanks and then set up a custom order right there and write down, oh, this blank, this is going to be for Derek, and I'm going to make this model pin. And then you have, you're continuing to make things are going to sell immediately versus making things you hope sell quickly.
Yeah,
It's a little
that's
bit of a different, view on it.
always a bit of a gamble, but it works out well when we get commissions.
Well, and that's the cool thing with commissions, because I actually have Nick making a pin for me right now from a Lisa Marie material. It's nice when you kind of are able to get those commission type things going, or, because it seems like every time you see a new pin, and that's where Instagram is wonderful and terrible. Because you go on there, you're scrolling, you're like, oh man, I need one of those. I need one of those. Look at that. That's cool. I want one of those. And, the variety of materials, and, or like, I'm a titanium junkie. So if you start making titanium pins, just don't let me know
Probably
immediately.
shouldn't tell you I'm already working on it.
Exactly. But
Titanium, Timascus, the crystallized titanium, Mokumegane are all gonna. I gotta play with all of them at some point.
with you having the Damascus makes perfect sense. And you said you were about to go down the knife making route, because that was, what, about 10 years ago in the EDC world, Damascus came on the scene like a wrecking ball, and
Yep,
everything was made out of Damascus, and that kind of carried on. But as we're starting to kind of wind down, I think I've covered most of my questions. So I'll just go to the second favorite question I love to ask everybody: what's next for Little Hollow Customs?
that's the best part. I never know. Uh, right now, short term, I don't think I showed you this yet. I've been working on a couple changes to the reduction design as well as some other things. So the reduction design now posts if I can hold it steady while holding it up. Um, Makes it a little bit longer and you don't lose the cap. Had to try that one out. The other thing that I've been testing for a while, and finally with the CNC it's possible. Um, both of these reductions are same exact internals. One's a ballpoint, the other's a fountain pen. They're fully interchangeable. Um,
That's nice.
so it's using the Schmidt rollerball tip that uses fountain penning. Uh, the problem is that is roughly the same size as a Yovo number 5 housing. So if I juggle here and don't drop things off my desk, we'll see how that works.
Sometimes that's the hard part with doing this on video. It's
Right?
you need that third hand or that stand to help. Because I've had that happen before when making videos, where something will roll off the desk and it's like, okay, let me start over again.
Yeah.
You know,
So really hard to see, but the rollerball has a smaller threaded body, so it won't work in a Yovo number 6 housing. So really wanted to be able to use the rollerball as an option, but all of my pens are Yovo number 6, and Yovo number 5 is too small for a lot of what I do. So I made a brass sleeve that the outside is Yovo number 6, and the inside is a Schmidt thread. And then that threads directly into any housing that uses a Yovo number 6. And it's designed so that instead of just working in my pens, I can take that same collar, and I've tested it in the Brooks pen that I've got on the table, on the desk. I've tested it in the Mythic pen on my desk. As long as you've got the Schmidt rollerball tip and that brass sleeve, you can thread it into any Yovo nib, any Yovo section, and turn a fountain pen into a rollerball. Admittedly, most fountain pen enthusiasts probably don't want the rollerball, but it opens up some options, and I was curious.
No, I actually love that, but I'm also one of the fountain pen people. I love fountain pens, but they're not always the right pen for the job. Because sitting on my desk now, I've got 4 different rollerballs. I've got a couple of ballpoints because they're not always the right tool.
Yep.
Either variety or paper, or you don't want bleed through, or in my planners, I like to use multi-pens. So having the option, I can write in fountain pen, but if it's going to bleed through, I don't want to mess with that. So It's nice having that option and making it where it's that universal, since the Yovo 6 is so commonly used. That's great, because that gives a lot of flexibility for all of your fellow makers' pens. They might just be buying, you can sell that, and then someone might be able to repurpose a maker's pen that they don't necessarily need another fountain pen inked, and make it a rollerball or something, just to kind of add to what they need at the time. So that's great. Now you just need to make a Bach fitting as well for the makers who sell pens on the Bach side, because I know you said you have a TriStar, and I know that's going to be a Bach threaded pin, because Scott uses Bach nibs and some of those.
That's a good point. I do have a Bach housing I can use. I was going to say I don't have a Bach to go off of yet. I'll just take his pen back apart.
There you go.
Sorry, Scott.
No, I actually love my TriStar Studio pen, and with him being local, I get to see him fairly often. So, Logan, I want to say thanks. We kind of got this one together on short order, but I think we had a great conversation, and I look forward to getting to see one of your pins in person at some point. Especially the hybrid pins, and now that I know you're experimenting with titanium and Damascus and all the others, that's just probably going to be terrible for my wallet, but it's great to know that cool things like that are on the roadmap. So, if you're new to the show, thanks for watching, and we are available on Apple Podcast and Spotify, but especially for ones like this, the YouTube video is the best way to go, so you can see all the different pins that Logan was holding up. And for that, we'll leave you there, and until next time, thanks for watching.